Today we have with us Colonel Philip Jordan, also known as Stephen Schmier. Now, Mr. Jordan, or Colonel Jordan as he likes to be called, is the ex-husband of Maura Schmier, the woman who has been on the Dr. Phil show and now the National Geographic show, exclaiming and proclaiming that she was victimized by Free Love Ministries, aka Aggressive Christianity, and kept locked in a shed for 6 months, where she did not have any running water, electricity, any kind of heat, or any kind of way to bathe and keep herself clean, or even a bathroom. She claims she lived on a diet of nothing but peanut butter sandwiches for 6 months, and that she was subjected to cruel and unusual punishment. None of these claims have been stood behind by law enforcement or by cult deprogrammers, but they are simply the assumptions of a woman whose mind is highly unstable. Now, Mr. Jordan had lived with Maura for a number of years. They were married and had, shall we say, an exciting alternative culture life as hippies in the mountains of Northern California. Now, Philip, if you would take it from here.
Okay. Anyway, I started my life out with Maura as being just lovers, shacked up. We were both hippies. Our lifestyle was one of, you would say, in those days, free love. So that's how we came together. We were in a group of people that basically interchanged partners. It was whatever you felt like doing. And then when we broke off from that group, we ended up getting some property and trying to live out that dream again, which really that particular counterculture movement was over by then, and that was like more in the late 70s. But we still had that spirit on us that we had to get back to the land. We had to like live close to nature, and so we bought property and we moved up there. And the conditions that we lived in were okay. We dug a hole in the ground to go to the bathroom. We hauled our water from the creek to drink. We lived in a tent. We had an old cook stove outside that we did our cooking on. So as you can see, it was like a rough type living. It was a living that we thought it was best for us, and we lived dirty. We took outside baths maybe once in a week. I jumped in the creek occasionally, and that's how we lived. And we had children with us. We had her children. She'd already had a couple girls from 2 different men, and then she had my boy. So there was 3 of us, 3 children and 2 adults, and we lived in a tent. And we stayed in that tent for approximately maybe 9 months, and then from there we moved into a small cabin in which I was building. And I can tell you right now that it was a cabin that was constructed more or less in the hippie style, different parts and pieces that you could come up with, however you can afford it. Because we were very poor. I lived in a hand-to-mouth situation. Whenever I could earn money, I did. And then we ran out of money. A lot of times we didn't have any food. A lot of times we did. It was all according to just however it went. There wasn't really any stability there. Basically, I was pretty disillusioned about my situation. I thought this is what I wanted, but really it was a sour dream for me, and I really wasn't happy. And then finally, through her institution or her contact with Jim and Deborah, they finally came up to visit us. I was miraculously saved through their coming there, because I didn't know that Jesus Christ could set me free from the bondages I was in. Because you got to remember that we were in deep sin. We were in deep sexual sins. We were in deep sins as far as the occult. We dabbled in everything you could think of when we were hippies. So you can see we were bound, and there was no way to get out of that bondage truthfully, unless Jesus Christ could break that hold. And I didn't know that. And I was miraculously set free, and I began to really get excited for God, and I wanted to serve God. I wanted to go all the way for God. That was the only thing in my mind. And I could say at that time that she was going along with that. And I don't know how excited she really was for God, but she was going along with what I wanted at that time. And so eventually we moved out of there as God allowed us to get out of that trap, because I will tell you, you could not get out of the trap, the bondages of devils, unless God set you free. Because we were bound to that area, and the devils were keeping us there. So finally we were able to move to Sacramento.
Mm-hmm. Now, once you moved to Sacramento, and of course you had communication with my husband and myself, we were in a small fellowship of other Christian believers. And then as we all prayed and sought the Lord together, we felt led to purchase the place that became known as Fort Freedom. Mm-hmm. Now, as the years transpired and you were eager to go along with what God was saying and doing in those days, we found that the Lord was leading us into becoming an army of God, so to speak, in the sense that we took on the essence that we are the army of God, that we will be a part of His international army, that we are called to be soldiers for Christ. So you might say that the Bible study group took on a militaristic flavor, and we all vowed ourselves to obedience unto what it was that God was requiring. But as we know, Maura had contention with that, still steeped in the hippie individualism and the desire to do her own thing. And you know and I know that there was much contention in the marriage. And some of these were roots that had come from years before, because Maura's initial contact with me after years of separation was that her marriage was on the rocks. So as the effort was put forth and much prayer in that regard, we found that she was still having difficulty controlling her certain behaviors, and I'll let you elaborate on that. And those behaviors and her lack of relinquishing the old lifestyle in many areas of her life put her in what she calls the shed. Now, was this really true? And what was the shed? And did she put herself in the shed, or was it the work of myself or my husband?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, let's put it in this context, that as a true Christian, you are to put off the former conversation. And that is, what it means is, you have to change from what you were to going on to what you need to be in God. So you can see that she had a real struggle with coming from being a hippie, coming with free love, coming with exchanging partners, and getting straightened out. And her willingness to want to change wasn't there. And in my heart, I wanted to change. We both had these problems of, adultery and fornication in our past lives. And I truly wanted that out of my life. And she supposedly was saying that she wanted that out of her life too. But you see, God wants us to change as Christians. He doesn't want us to continue in the same conversation, the same lifestyle. He wants a new life in us. Okay, so the contention was, did we want the new life, or did we want to keep to the old life? And God wanted new life for us, and I wanted new life. And He was giving that to us. He was giving us a clean environment. He was giving us iron clothes. He was giving us baths every day. We were in a much cleaner environment than we had ever been in, and spiritually speaking, very clean. There was no foul talking. There was no interchange of sexual innuendos. Where we lived was a consecrated place, prayer every day, meetings 3 or 4 times a week. It was very good for me. I loved it. I needed it. I needed this in my life. There was times when God was correcting us. He would correct me and her both on our behavior. And I felt that I needed that. I needed correction. I needed the the unction of God to go forward in my life, and I knew that Jim and Deborah over me was what I needed. You see, it's like, how can you go forward in God unless you do have some leaders that are honest, that do want to lead you forward in God, and do want to correct you to see that you would turn out better in your Christian walk. Okay, we can't be hypocrites in this, and I never wanted to be a hypocrite. And the idea of me not wanting to be a Christian in the past was because of the hypocritical act. And I finally met some people that weren't hypocrites. They really wanted God. They really wanted to follow God. And so that's what I wanted. Now, whether she wanted that, that's the question that we're examining right here, right now. Because God finally pinpointed her on certain points in her life, and a lot of it was in the sexual area, because she was a rover. She was a type of person that could go out at night and lay with somebody and come back home and not even think anything about it. Because when she got, so to speak, stimulated, or, let's put it this way, horny, that she would just follow through with that. And of course, we were living in an environment where, man, that was no way you could not do that. There was not, it was like that was a taboo. Where we were living now, and this was like by 1986, and that was a total taboo. You lived straight with God. If you had a problem, you put that underfoot. We were learning dominion at that time. We were learning to take charge of those things that would attack us and tell us to do sinful things, and we'd say no to that. That's the whole idea. Well, anyway, it got to the point to where she wouldn't say no to those things, and she would go out, and she would even use men in our own midst for her own devices. And we're talking about where she would be masturbating daily. I couldn't satisfy her sexually. And so it came to the point to where if there was anything that we could do to help her, we wanted to help her, But if you're a person that won't change and tell yourself no, then what do you do? What does a husband do when a wife wants to go out with other guys? What do you do? Well, it came to the point where correction was needed. Okay? And she was corrected, and she was told that, okay, you're doing all these things. Now, what are you going to do about it? She made a confession, and there's many written confessions of her that she was doing all these things. And so it was decided that, well, you're just going to have to leave. And as a husband, I thought to myself, how can I live with this when this is going on and there's no change going about? So what happened was that she ended up staying in the camp by the mercies of God, and she went back to what we call it was a clubhouse built by myself, Jim and Deborah's children, and my other boy was involved in that. So the three of us and myself had built this clubhouse. And let me tell you a little bit about the camp. The camp was in an immaculate shape. All the houses were in good shape. The clubhouse was an immaculate clubhouse. I mean, I even had conduit electricity on the first story of the clubhouse and the second story. So, and it was carpeted. It was totally closed in. It was all new material that I had gotten from jobs that I had done. And we actually had the building inspectors in that camp at least 6 times a year, because we were working on a barracks, we were working on the big house, we had a little schoolhouse that we worked on. They were there continually. They knew about the clubhouse. We had built a shop in the back under inspection. Everything we did was up to par, and everybody knew what was going on there. The officials knew what was going on. It was in the open. We weren't living under a basket. The officials of that city knew exactly what we were up to, and it was being inspected. So, like I told you, at least 6 times a year they would show up there, and I was the one dealing with them. But at any rate, as you can see, it wasn't what we would call a shed. It wasn't musty. It wasn't like dark and dreary. No, not at all. That place was actually used as one of our first what we would call service places, where we serve people coffee and donuts early in the morning. So you see, the place was frequented and trafficked.